born in a sin. From my mother's womb, it's like a poison in my genes. HIV, when your state is positive, I'm negative like Jay-Z. No, not the rapper, but the head of my country. Is it true what I imagine? It's constantly evil. So it is said in the book of Genesis. And so it is sad, cause it will burn me to ashes. The wages of sin, well, is to keep the bucket. But then Christ came to clean up my crisis. Scrub me in his blood, now I'm cleaner than outcast. No sir, I would never ever be a candidate for jail or judgment. Mr. Magistrate,
Judge, I may be guilty as charged, but before you put the hammer down, follow the blood trail leading to Calcutta. Walk on the road they call Via de la Rosa. That's where the mighty one of God was offered, and the blood that was spilled was for me, sir. So your honor, I cannot be a prisoner. There's therefore now no condemnation.
Peace and blessings, peace and black power. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon out here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the African family all around the world, every time zone. So this afternoon, we are going to have another episode of Bridal Sundays. And in today's episode, we are going to have a book review. And the book is one of the most popular books. I believe most of us have read this book. The title of the book is Capitalist Nigger. The author of the book is a Nigerian brother called Chika Onyeani. And this is a book I read probably a decade ago. I don't even remember when I actually read the book. But I remember probably almost everything he said in the book. At the time when I read the book, for me it was quite revolutionary. It was a necessary conversation, and it's still a necessary conversation. So hence we are going to review this book. And it's important to review this book because most of us have read it compared to other African scholarship books that are out there, written by some of the great ancestors and leaders and elders, the grandmasters that came before us, your Ivan van Sertima, Dr. Joseph Ben Johanan, your Dr. Hendrik Clark, and so on. And most of those books have not really been read as much as Capitalist Nigger. So, as a starting point in reviewing the book, I'll basically go through some of the things he has said in the book, and then we'll have a discussion around it. And of course, as we go through the points, if anybody wants to add or subtract anything from what has been discussed, you may request to speak, and I'll pass you the mic. And also, we follow the protocol of putting our hands up when we want to speak. So, I will begin. I will select certain sections in the book as part of the review, and we'll take it from there. All right, so in page 2 of the book, the author states, "I decided to write Capitalist Nigger to to open a debate on the state of the African race. But in doing so, my intention was not to treat my own contribution to the debate with kid gloves. It is to tell it like it is, the truth and nothing but the truth. My observations are bound to infuriate a lot of people. Even the title of the book is bound to make a lot of people angry. Many people will be angry, to say it mildly, when I question the intelligence of my people compared to the Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, Malaysians, Filipinos, and others who attained independence at the same time as most African countries. If the book generates the kind of dialogue, debate, or argument, or against the position I have taken, so be it. But it would even be more relevant if in the process solutions are offered to help extricate Africans from being a consumer to a productive race. So that's a very good opening to the book. Very, it carries the heart or the purpose of why he wrote the book. And so he in the beginning, in the introduction, he has made a comparison between Africans and the Asians. So the question is he right? That's the title of the discussion today. Capitalist Nigger. Is Chika Onyeani right? A book review. So the first point I started with, I think I will come back to this one. I feel like I need to go to the next one first. And in page 11, in Africa, we are totally undisciplined. We have leaders who are not ruthless with themselves in pursuit of excellence, but who are quick being ruthless to their citizens. Africa has been a disgrace to most of its greatest admirers. The promise of independence, which was supposed to usher in a period of prosperity and economic growth, has not happened. Rather, Africa has been mired in all kinds of indescribable disorderliness brought about by people who have the mentality that the world owes them something. Today, Africa's debt to the world stands over $375 billion. So that was back then. It's definitely more now. This is the money that the Western world has irresponsibly lent to Africa, with no hope that they would ever have the funds to repay. In fact, in 1998, Africa spent more money servicing the loan than they received in assistance. All right, so the first part that he has mentioned, that in Africa we are totally undisciplined. That is true. We have leaders who are not ruthless with themselves in pursuit of excellence, who are quick to be ruthless to their citizens. And that is true. And the other part which is true is that the promise of independence, which was supposed to usher in a period of prosperity and economic growth, has not happened. That is very true. No, in Africa, we were very excited to take over the parliament, the European parliaments that were set up in our continent, and take over the political system and replace those who were oppressing us. So the part that is, I would say, I wonder which part is not true here. I think there was something that I thought, and this is the money of the Western world as irresponsibly lent to Africa with no hope that they would ever have the funds to repay. In fact, Africa spent more. So the part about leaders, African leaders, being totally undisciplined and all that is absolutely true. And the whole thing of the disgrace, where I was disappointed in the statement is the part where he actually mentions the root of the problem, but he doesn't actually specify that the Western world has irresponsibly lent to Africa with no hope that they would ever have the funds to repay. So the question is, why does the West keep giving money to Africa, knowing very well that Africa will never be able to repay all these funds? The reason why the West is doing that has nothing to do with, oh, we feel sorry for them or let's help them out. The reason why the West is pumping money into Africa is, and money which they just print, by the way. The United States doesn't borrow from the IMF. They just go to the machine and start printing and printing. And the latest term for all this printing and printing is called quantitative easing, a term that was invented after the 2008 economic collapse, international economic collapse. It became international because when the United States coughs, the whole world catches a cold. When they sneeze, we all catch a flu. So that's the part that he has not addressed. The fact that they pump in money. If anybody has seen all these Italian mafia movies, we've seen stories where a person might be financially in trouble, probably might get evicted, and one of these mafia guys would hand over go and bring and give them a brown envelope. Perhaps they're getting evicted, and they're like, "Yeah, here, go pay your loan and all that." And the person would refuse because they know that there are no free lunches. And this person, if I take this money, they're going to own me. And they would refuse, and the guy would forcefully insist somehow and just, intimidate the person. So the person would take the money, and they would indeed take the money and go pay off the debt. And then few weeks, months down the line, the guy comes to collect. He needs a favor. And so, this is the same reason why the West keeps lending money to African countries. So, and also the part that he hasn't addressed here also is that these people he calls African leaders are not leaders. A leader in Africa, we had leaders in Africa. Thomas Sankara was one of them, and he was the total opposite of totally undisciplined, ruthless with themselves in pursuit of excellence, but were quick being ruthless to their citizens. Thomas Sankara started implementing the things that were in our spaces on Twitter. We think perhaps these leaders do not know. We talk about we should have this, we should have that, we should do this. He came out, and within months of taking office, he started implementing and implementing and implementing. So we definitely had leaders. And his quick implementation became a problem to the West, but not only to the West. The people, because the colonial people, I don't want to call them masters, because to be a master you have to master something. It means you have being a master is all about self mastery at the end of the day. So the history of colonialism is that when the Europeans came in, they couldn't fight us toe to toe. They couldn't, basically, contrary to the myth, that contrary to what most people think, that, or the popular narrative that Europeans came and they had superior weaponry, they came with guns, and therefore that's how we lost Africa. There is no truth in that. The reality is Europeans could not face us on the battlefield toe to toe. And part of the, I can give multiple historical accounts to actually prove that point. I will give one example for now. In South Africa, on the 16th of December, a few days ago, the descendants of the Dutch settlers were celebrating the defeat of AmaZulu at the Blood River War or battle. So what actually happened before that is that Dingani had slaughtered a few of them. Yeah, no, more than quite a few, quite a large number of them. But before that, actually, when the Dutch settlers arrived in the region of KwaZulu, they did not fight. They came, they made a deal with Dingani. So the question, they negotiated and made a deal. So the question is, since when do people negotiate? People have always negotiated, but negotiations only apply when you do not have monopoly on power. So that's when you start opening up for negotiations. If I come in with a gun and I want to rob you, it's not a negotiation. You have no choice. I'm telling you what to do. But a negotiation happens when both sides have something to lose in the battle. So they negotiated, and Dingani made a deal with them regarding giving them a portion of land and whatnot, whatever agreements were made and whatever benefit he was getting from there. But he decided to stab them in the back and slaughtered quite a large number of them, including one of the famous leaders. And so that's when the Boers prepared for a retaliation, and they were wise enough to come up with a brilliant plan to take the battle to the river. And so it's called the Blood River War, because AmaZulu were coming from the other side of the river, and the Dutch settlers were on the other side. And so they charged, the AmaZulu would have to charge, cross the river, swim through the river to go and stab them one by one. So the Dutch settlers were quite smart enough about that. They took the battle to the river. AmaZulu should not have accepted that zone. And so, as they would cross, because Chika had, prior to that, Chika had changed the whole strategy of war, where you no longer throw the spear, you have to actually go and stab the person. So with that, if you really think about that, the river was their victory, because Amazulu would have to swim across to go and stab them. So that bought them time to shoot them one by one without really getting much opposition. So it was more of an unfair setting in terms of war, but it was fair because in terms of intelligence, they shouldn't have accepted that war, the location of the battle. However, before that, even they prayed to their God and made covenants and said, please, if we give us this victory, if you give us this victory, we will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They made a vow. And so, yes, the day of the battle happened, and eventually they fulfilled their vow, came to Pretoria and set up a monument unto their God. And each year, on the 16th of December, the day of the battle, they go and commemorate and give thanks for that victory. Which tells me it's a big deal. It's such a big deal that they have been celebrating it for centuries now. Nobody really celebrates. If you're an MMA fighter and you go and beat up a kid on the street, you don't commemorate that. You commemorate great victories, having defeated a mighty opponent. So the 16th of December actually glorifies Amazulu. They are saying they are a great opponent, that we have taken down a giant. So that, think about that, and think about how many other groups are in South Africa. AmaXhosa, AmaNdebele, Mavenda, Mashangani, Now, imagine just adding Xhosas to that battle. They wouldn't, well, even if you didn't add AmaXhosa, if you remove the river, they wouldn't have won that battle. But now, today, there is this misconception that we are under Dutch settler rule because the British have basically left South Africa. We don't have many of them. It's very, if you can run into an English-speaking white person in South Africa, that is like a rare thing. So most of them speak Afrikaans, the Dutch language. So, but today people have, in 1994, these African leaders that Chika Onyeani is talking about, they justified having negotiated a certain deal that did not favor the Africans. And I was very young at the time, so what we were told is that they had to negotiate to avoid a civil war, bloodshed, because as black people did not have the means to defeat them. And I was like, that's ridiculous now if you really think about that, because the same Boers who had guns had to really come up with the best strategy to just defeat one group of us, not combined with AmaXhosa and anybody else. Then, second example, last example for now, would then be Sekhukhune. Sekhukune's battle is probably the most underrated. Most people don't even know about it. When King Sekhukhune came into contact with the Dutch settlers had been trying to take him down, and he kept on defeating them. They couldn't. And so the British came, and they said, no, because the Dutch are not very, they compared to if you really look at the British and the French and all that, they're not very strategic people. They apply force. So force was not working for them. With their guns, they could not defeat King Sekhukhune, of the king of Bapedi, with his spears and his men. So the British came and said, no, that's not how it's done. We're going to teach you how to deal with these people. You don't fight these African natives on the ground told they'll defeat you. Don't you know? So, well, now you know you failed to defeat him. And so the British commander who came along devised the plan. He started investigating to find out what weak point can we use around here to deal with this man. And so they found out he had a half brother, Mampuru. And so they said, wow, great. Mampuru, half brother, probably envies his brother. So yes, they got hold of Mampuru, and Mampuru, they probably, I don't know what they told him. They probably told him, you are the rightful king, or you should be on the throne, not your brother. And yeah, so he gladly agreed to be an ally of the Dutch, the British. So he came with his men, and then they organized another group of men, because the area is in Mpumalanga, which is that's one of the provinces where, or rather one province where you have more groups in one place. Yeah, because in certain provinces you only have one group of people. Like Northwest, it's Botswana, only KZN is Amazulu. Mpumalanga has almost everybody. You've got Amashangani, Amazulu, Maswati, Bapedi, so it has more than any other province. So then they organized a small group of Amaswati in the area, not a small group. So they, quite a number of men, and they said, hey, we're good to go. This guy cannot defeat us this time around. And so they charged. There was the British and their men, the Dutch and their men, Mampuru and his men, and the Swazis, and they came together. Well, there's no guessing what would have happened there, because it was completely an impossible situation. So that's how they took him down. So that comes to show us that they could not defeat us on the battlefield. Guns had nothing to do with their advantage. But now, why am I giving this background? Giving this background to show that they did not use military might to take Africa. So what did they use? Explorers were sent, missionaries were sent. So what they actually used is one of their weapons of mass destruction was religion. They appealed to they basically located the heads of the communities, whether it be a king or a chief of the region, and they'd appeal to him, give him gifts, and lure him to be baptized. The Portuguese, when they came, they obviously used Christianity. The Arabs, before that, they used Islam. So there were benefits in being baptized and getting a Christian name. So the people would definitely resist the religion, because they had a superior system than religion. They had sacred African science, which is basically the laws of the universe. That's what they worked with. Voodoo is nothing but the laws of the universe embodied in human form. So that's basically that. So they appealed to these community leaders or traditional leaders. Don't like the word traditional leaders. But yeah, the leaders of the day back then, the chiefs and the kings, the royal leaders, royal heads, they targeted these men by appealing to them, giving them gifts, and making deals with them. So if you're a chief of one group, Vanuatu here, and say, well, if you bring us for one person, you capture one, and we can enslave him, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, and they'll go to the other people. And so they would appeal to their vanity, and they'll give them these useless gifts, useless in terms of value in exchange, because what you're giving and what you're getting determines the value that you're getting. So now what they were giving was too much. So these chiefs and kings became the point of contact for colonialism. And these became the first politicians, first black politicians, the first African politicians on the continent. That's why, that's why these so-called African leaders he's talking about, they are a continuity of the first leaders that they came into contact with, that collaborated with the colonizers. And these are the people that Africa, young Africans are looking to for leadership, for direction into the future. This is what everybody's talking about. Black Twitter in Africa, it takes the biggest chunk of the discussion. It's this politician and that politician, and this one is free this one, arrest that one, and so on. And they feel like if you remove this one and put that one will do this and that, and that one, white people don't like him, so therefore he represents us and whatnot. Ridiculous. So this is the part where we have leaders. So what happened to Thomas Sankara when he was killed? So actually, how did the West get to kill Thomas Sankara? The West didn't have to do much, because the West cannot just come into Africa and take someone if we don't hand them over or let them take them, So Thomas Sankara's level of excellence, the ruthlessness that he had first imposed on himself by cutting down all these European appetites, so that he could focus the energy on restoring the people of Burkina Faso. I love the word Burkina Faso. I wish we could name the whole continent Burkina Faso, the land of the upright. And yeah, it's a beautiful name. So the main people that were necessary in eliminating Thomas Sankara were the traditional leaders. Those ones I can call them traditional leaders. And the reason why it was easy to use them is Thomas Sankara's new bar that he had set was becoming a problem for these guys, because he was cutting down on because now when the Europeans formed this political system after they had these collaborators enable them to be able to take Africa, all over the continent, they maintained, that's the reason why Europeans maintained these traditional leaders. They paid them salaries, stuff like that. And I mean, during apartheid in South Africa, they were earning salaries from the so-called apartheid government. And some of them were even given so-called independent states, which were called Bantustans. And so he'd be like, to the people, he looked like he's the president, but he gets all his money from the apartheid regime. So they maintained this because they figured, hey, if we dissolve the traditional leaders, then we will lose that power, because that's how we got it, through them. So now We need to maintain them and keep them at that level of comfort, let them get some of the taxpayers' money. So yeah, they maintained them, and they kept receiving funds from the same government, from the enemy, and so when Thomas Sankara came in, he was now cutting off that luxury, those benefits. He first imposed them on himself as a true leader. He was a Mason, a true Mason. So when Thomas Sankara started saying, "Now we're not going to be paying you all these crazy salaries, we're cutting them down," and then these traditional leaders started realizing that they're not going to be having all these comforts, and they were now getting uncomfortable, and therefore they were mad at him for bringing order into Burkina Faso. So he had angered a lot of these traditional leaders. So the West figured, this should be an easy one. We can just go to them and say, "Hey, so how's it going? Do you guys like your new leader? I hear he cut off some of your benefits that you were getting from us. So what are you guys going to do about that?" And so, hey, they like, "Yeah, screw this guy." And so, hey, they eliminated him. And what do you think then happened to the seat that Thomas Sankara had taken? A puppet was placed there, obviously. Same case with Patrice Lumumba of the DRC. Same story. Exact same story. Yeah, he angered a lot of people. But the thing is, if you go out there in the streets and maybe your passion is to restore these young ladies that are involved, the sex workers, you will want to get them off the street, rehabilitate them, and then when you've rehabilitated them, some of them might be hooked on drugs because they were injected with heroin and all these kind of things. And then when you have rehabilitated them, then they can be able to come into maybe start getting jobs and organize for them to be employed, and then it works. So as the African conscious community, we talk about doing that. Why don't we get these young girls off the streets, rehabilitate them, because obviously they don't want to be there out there, But if you take them off the street, they'll go back because they need rehabilitation, They need also from drugs and also psychologically, they need to go through therapy and detox their system. And then it will take time, but it's something that's doable. So that's what we usually talk about. But then the part that we don't talk about is what happens if you do that. Who's going to be upset? Do you think the pimps out there are going to be happy with you doing that? Obviously not. So what are the pimps going to do? They're going to come for you. That's exactly what happened to Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Krisani in South Africa. Even though Krisani, it's a little bit of a different case because he was coming in. He was not the highest leader, but he was a threat due to being the head of the Liberation Army. So you could not, if they had not eliminated him, obviously we would have had a case of a potential rebel army that was out there that could perform a coup, and no one would be able to stop them because the booze and what they never say is during these Afrikaners, or the Dutch settlers, during apartheid, which was actually not formed by them, they fought battles in the so-called frontline states all the way to Angola, and they lost a lot of these battles. But no one talks about that because they want to maintain that, yeah, we made this negotiation because, yes, we had no choice. So this is where the part to address the part where he says this is the money that the Western world has irresponsibly lent to Africa, with no hope that they would ever have the funds to repay. In fact, in 1998, Africa spent more money servicing the loan than they received in assistance. So that is what he's saying is true, but what is missing in that conversation is a historical background. Because if someone reads this book and they read the section as I had read it about a decade or more ago, it just paints a picture that there's probably something wrong with us as Africans. What's wrong with us? Like, why can't we be like the Asians and the Chinese and the Filipinos that he's mentioned? So, which I will also be going back to. All right. Yes, we are discussing. It's a book review. Capital is Nigger. It's Chika, Onyeani, right? So, as I go through each point, the floor is open. If anybody wants to add or subtract from what I've said about the point or sections from the book. So I'll be going through some of the sections in the book as part of the book review. So the next one, page 16 of the book states, at the bottom of the page, it says, Africans live for today. Let tomorrow take care of itself and be damned. Africans are considered the most loyal to product brands. That is true. Okay. Africans live for today. Let tomorrow take care of itself and be damned. I wouldn't agree with that. Okay. It is a herd mentality. Whether it is in politics or in business, people know that the black mentality. Because of this herd mentality, companies discount Africans when it comes to advertising campaigns. Blacks are considered afterthoughts, or to fulfill certain so-called quotas, blacks will always buy our products, whether we market to them or not. Has been the confidential report to many companies. Companies like Timberlake, I think he meant to say Timberland, yeah. The shoe company have articulated the fact that allowing marketing to blacks would cheapen the image of their product. Fortunately for them, blacks prefer to buy top of the line. Anything that costs a lot of money is considered the best. It is a status symbol. Okay, there he is telling the absolute truth. There is Kanye West said something in his song "The Diamonds." Diamonds are forever. He said it's in the black person's soul to rock the gold. You know, so there is generally African people love good things. That is true. It is in our soul. It is in our soul. If you come to in South Africa, in Johannesburg, there are what you call informal settlements, and these are houses built with corrugated metal, which are actually used in construction sites for obviously temporary setting up. When you have a project, civil engineering project in the area, whether you're building a road or a structure, you will have these offices set up obviously for temporary reasons. So these were obviously designed for that. So now in Johannesburg, you have people that permanently have made them permanent residents. Obviously, due to poverty, they can't afford to build a house. And usually you put it up temporarily while you build your own house. And then you demolish it later on. So when you go and see some of these houses, they are very, like, people will, if you go inside, you will find it looks well furnished. They will have TV, they will have nice things in there, you know? So if you compare poor white South Africans to, if you look at poor white South Africans, they look like homeless people. The way they walk like they've been beaten up by the the gods and the earth and everything else. But there's something about black people that even though they're poor, there is a sense of pride, of dignity that we still walk with, you know. So that is basically, the truth is, hence I think we are more prone to be loyal to product brands, and hence the collaborators of colonialism were easily offered these gifts by the Portuguese, the Arabs, and all these colonial countries that came. So these appetites we still have. In South Africa, when there was during these lockdowns, there was a time when alcohol was banned, and when it was lifted, you saw it made crazy queues, very long queues, people wanting to buy alcohol. And I looked at the number of black people there who usually would say, we want our land back. And the question is, what would happen if the Europeans would say, okay, cool, we can give you the land. So but if we give you the land back, you can no longer have Amstel and Castle and Heineken and Moet and all these, whatever people drink these days. Go back to Umqombothi, your African beer, that's homemade stuff. I think you'll get a lot of sellouts. Say, well, if you guys vote against us giving you the land back, we'll give you cases of alcohol. I think the same appetites that sold Africa out, they still exist today. So, but the part where he says Africans live for today, we're on page 16, let tomorrow take care of itself and be damned. Okay, that part I'd like to disagree, in the sense that it's quite generalized. Because I look at how our parents, coming from a background of very small resources, very little resource, managed to make sacrifices. There is no race of people that has made sacrifices for their children to have better futures than African people. You go to the villages, the sacrifices that are made are worthy of great documentaries. Those mothers and fathers are supposed to be on Time magazine, Mother of the Year, Father of the Year, and so on. So they've made a lot of sacrifices. So the whole concept of we live for today, I wouldn't agree with that. Okay, so the next one. So we are, just a reminder again, if anybody wants to add to whatever I've discussed. Add or subtract, you can just request to speak, put up your hand, and before we move on to next step. Okay, then the next one, he says, yeah, Mr. Clyde, you want to say something? Clyde. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to add to one of your first points that you were talking about with the loans and the IMF. There's this book by John Perkins called Economic Hitman that touches on the point of how the World Bank sends out these loans, and when these countries can't pay back the loans, they come back and ask for favors and ask for land for and their infrastructure.
Absolutely. This is a very old tactic. Indeed, that is exactly what they've been doing. They do that all around the world in all countries, but Africa is where they actually do it in all force. So yeah, and so thanks for adding that. Page 19. Chika Onyeani writes, it is pathetic to note that more than 40 years after the first African country got its independence, all our clothing is still imported from abroad, notably Europe, China, and Asia. In the 90 to more than 100 degrees weather of Africa, you are not considered to have dressed properly unless you're wearing a suit. The suits are not even produced in Africa. The yarns for the suit clothing are made in Europe or Hong Kong. The thread is made in Europe, the needle is made in Europe, the tailors are either Europeans or Asians, and when the Africans have condescended to wear their own flowing robes, all the textile materials are also imported. In fact, the lace, which our women like so much, is imported. So we get the crux of what he's saying, and this is absolutely true. Everything. I mean, in the conscious community, when the whole discussion about, okay, so Africa is diamonds, we sell them at a very low wholesale price, and then they get processed in Europe or in the West, and then they sell them back to us at a high retail price. And so and then the discussion usually is, why don't we get our people skilled in processing and set up the infrastructure to be able to process this? This is usually the discussion within the conscious community, the African conscious community. But the missing link, which is the most important one, is that you may wanna set up. The reality is it's not like we are not capable of setting up infrastructure or any of that, because Africa has produced in the world. People who tend to wanna give Asia the credit, but Africa has produced intellectuals throughout Africa that have benefited the West, because this is as the brother was saying about the economic hitman, is that Africa is not supposed to work. That is a plan. Like most of our people will say, our politicians are failing us. Oh, hold on, not failing us. They are failing they are failing or something. Yeah, failing us, true, but they are failing. And no, African politicians have never failed. Whatever African politicians had planned to do, they've done very well. When Chris Hani and his men were in then Rhodesia, while it was under British rule, and they had an operation there which was later then exposed. They were surrounded by the British army. That was basically a Rhodesian army. They were quite a very small number of men there, because it was an underground operation, so were not anticipating a battle with the military there. So then they were surrounded by these guys, and then so they sat there and kept quiet and still. And so and didn't move an inch. And then the Rhodesian army got frustrated. These white guys got arrogant. And so Chris Hani's men located the commander of the army, and they shot two of them. And the whole army dispersed and ran off, leaving their weapons and food and everything behind. Because that's basically how a conventional army is set up. You, without your leaders, you basically done. So they ran off. So when Chris Hani came back and all these expeditions he was doing, things were effective. Thomas Sankara was super effective. In fact, there should be a movie about how effective he was in implementing the things people are talking about, discussing in the conscious community. We should have this. We should have infrastructure. We should be implementing this. That is not where the problem is. The problem is in this whole concept of economic hitman. We are captured. So every state, every government is set up, in fact, in the whole world. The United States, if you look at their debt, it looks like it's a joke, all these numbers, trillions in debt. And then you ask yourself, who do they owe? Who do they owe? Not the IMF, that is for sure. So what he's saying, it is pathetic. 40 years after the first African country got its independence, we are still back where we were. In fact, I feel like we are even far backwards than we were back then, because segregation, I will speak for South Africa, because we had a different system than other African countries, because we were basically a copy of the United States. Apartheid was, they just took the whole Jim Crow laws and implemented them, yeah. Hence I say apartheid was not a Dutch settler movement. It was actually an American project. It was a Western project, collaboration, FBI was here, CIA, everybody was here running the show behind the scenes and giving the Afrikaner the credit. So when they were doing all of that, a lot of us actually thought we are actually fighting this small number of people, this minority group and whatnot. But at the end of the day, there was a force behind it, and a larger force behind it. And we could see also when we look at the ANC, when in 1960 there was a declaration of the armed struggle, they made allies with the enemies of all the enemies of the United States. So it just comes to show that they knew that they're not actually fighting these white trash. So when segregation was cancelled, so during apartheid, the South African version of Jim Crow law, black people were, because we had no choice, we had the safest community in the country. South Africa today has been branded a rape capital, and women get beat up. Even the government has set up a gender-based activism, so many days of activism against gender-based violence and whatnot. I don't really follow it because it's just a bunch of nonsense. The government should not be involved in activism, and they should be arresting criminals. That's it. Yeah, simple and plain. So these were not issues back in the 80s, you know. The worst thing that could even happen to you back then was getting robbed. Not even with a gun, with a knife, and they would not even kill you. They would scratch you. Yeah, it would be painful. You probably have to get stitches. Yeah, you get robbed on payday. That was usually the worst thing. So our communities were safer because even the criminals within the community could not, um, you know, partake in these criminal activities within the community. They would have to go to another neighborhood, very far, and go mess around there, then run off, because the community would take care of you. And that system is still there, but it only exists among the poorest of the South African community, where if you go and steal, you will have what they call kangaroo justice. So we had the safest communities. Women were not being killed and raped and all these things, because the thing is, if we're living in this community and you beat up your girlfriend and she has a blue eye, she can't hide the blue eyes. When she gets home, daddy sees her, big brother sees her, uncle sees her. She can explain and say, no, it was my fault, but they're gonna step out and go to the guy's house. They know where he lives. You know. So it was almost impossible. So what brought in all these problems is that integration destroyed community. How did integration destroy community? When we were segregated, we had no choice but to stick together and form a community, because the police were not there to protect us. So we had to form a community. We had businesses of our own. Even some of the big your big business people that you know today, your Herman Mashaba that founded Black Like Me hair products, and Maponya, he had his own BMW franchise. These big black politicians, tycoons, started their businesses in the townships during the time of segregation, but of course they were some of them were in collaboration with the apartheid regime, because how do you own a white man's franchise in the 80s, a BMW franchise? How do you even do that when black people are not allowed to be anything but a doctor and a teacher and a policeman? So that's where integration became the curse, because now when you go to the inner city, black people didn't live in the inner city, lived in our communities. When you move to the inner city, there is no community there. The inner city, it's a dog world. It's a European society, because it's not organic African. It was built by Europeans, and therefore it will yield the fruits of the people that created it. So when you look at the inner city, it's everybody for himself. Hence, somebody can rob you, and people can watch and look away. So that is where the whole thing of losing our culture came in as well. All right, so I'll go to page number 30. In fact, before I go to page number 30, I'm going to go back to point number 1 that I skipped. The one I said I'll go back to, that is on page 2. On page 2, where he said, many people will be angry, to say it mildly, when I question the intelligence of my people compared to the Asians, the Indians, the Pakistanis, Malaysians, the Filipinos, and others who attained independence at the same time as most African countries. If the book generates the kind of dialogue, debate, and argument for or against the position I have taken, so be it. But it would even be more relevant if the process solutions are offered to help extricate Africans from being a consumer to a productive race. So this part, I disagree with the first part of it. The last part of it, I like how he ended it, where he's actually saying this is an opening of a debate, an opening of a conversation. This is what the book is all about. And for those that disagree, please bring an alternative solution. So, the part about him saying, comparing us to Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, Malaysians, Filipinos, having received their independence at the same time as most African countries, that is a problematic statement when anybody looks at it from a historical point of view, because Asia, and this is something I really want to emphasize, Asia has never been the prize for Europe. First of all, all continents need each other except for Africa. So if we were to close the oceans, the natural borders, say wherever you are in your landmass, survive where you are with what you have. I mean, Africa wouldn't need anyone. And I'm not just talking about resources, I'm talking about even the intellect, the expertise that everybody is talking about we need to have. We already have that. The difference is when an African child is an outstanding performer, they have a very high chance to get a scholarship somewhere in the West, where they will go and contribute their intelligence there, and which will then be credited to the West. They will not say, they will not give credit to the country that actually developed this person. So, but they've made sure that every African country is a story of the blood diamonds. The story of the blood diamonds, I'm sure most of us have seen the movie Sierra Leone, where they set up wars in order for conflict, in order to have the diamonds at a very cheap price, or basically for nothing. So conflict basically destroys economic value of things at the end of the day. So that's basically what they've done throughout Africa. Where there isn't conflict, like places like South Africa, where there isn't conflict, but they've set up puppets everywhere. And so these people do what they're supposed to do. In South Africa, there was a national airline called South African Airways. It was basically international standard in terms of the basic things, what it's supposed to do. And they were even successful in launching a flight between South Africa and Beijing, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I can't remember if it's Beijing or Hong Kong, but they could fly to China. So it never had problems in terms of the expertise. It had excellent pilots. Everything was just functional. in terms of the actual operations. But the politicians come into power, they need funding. But who funds them? The white monopoly capital, they fund them to come in. I remember Bill Gates was talking about how he funded Nelson Mandela's 1994 election campaign. So, when they do that, what do they want back? What do they want in return? They want something. And so, in the case of white monopoly capital, what I've observed is that they just want you to create incompetence. Just make sure things don't function, because where there's no order, it's easy to steal. It's easy to take things. So that's what they did, because if you look in South Africa, all the government departments, all of them are very, they are dysfunctional. For example, when they bill you for electricity, they actually just estimate, and nothing is functional. But go to the South African Receiver of Revenue. Now, okay, so the other departments are like, okay, what Trevor Noah would say, African standards, because he got his green card. He qualified for it because he could, speak the language of white supremacy. So, but the South African Receiver of Revenue is probably at the same level as the IRS in the United States, because the South African Receiver of Revenue, when you go and you buy a piece of land and you sell it, they will know. They know all your expenditures that go through. The only expenditures they know nothing about are the ones where you actually pay cash. But all the other expenditures, if somebody drops a big chunk of cash in your bank account, they're gonna know. If you buy a couple of Krugerrands, there's a certain limit. If you buy them at the same time, they will know. If you sell them, they will know. The system is so advanced. They know. I mean, if you look at the population in the country and the number of transactions that happen, and they can still keep up and trace who's buying one, who's selling what. They know all of that, but they don't know that their colleagues at the municipality somehow doesn't know how much you're spending on electricity. They just estimate it. They're like, we don't know. You call them and the phone rings and nobody answers. So it's a contradiction. So it has nothing to do with incompetence. So when South African Airways became privatized, people thought that that we failed, or the government failed to save SAA. No, they did not fail. That was a plan in the beginning, because when the Europeans handed over Parliament, the keys to Parliament, they had already their collaborators who would be sitting there representing them with a black face, because then they could be trusted. And so they could loot for them on their behalf. And the best way is just put somebody there, and the excuse will be, oh no, they were incompetent. But it has nothing to do with incompetence, because the greatest expertise in operating an airline are the technical expertise, your pilots, the maintenance crew, and all these people that are involved in ensuring the runnings, the actual operation. And now and the flights were always full. They're always on time. They get to the destination on time. So they had customers, and in fact, all government employees were flying with them. And then you're saying they're not making money, they need bailouts. That don't make no sense. So money management, really, who was incompetent then? So it has nothing to do with incompetence. The end result shows us exactly what had been planned, and the plan was to privatize. Because the politicians in Africa, they come screaming socialism and nationalization. Then obviously that's a problem for the white monopoly capital. So what they do is you preach that, but you make sure you move in such a way that the end result will be privatization, because people will say, hey, actually, they had to privatize it. Whew, we were actually tired of bailing that thing out with our money. So we're glad. So they convince you and make it look like it was the solution. They had no other choice. So you create, if you want to win, you create your villain and your hero, and then you'll be in charge. No one can challenge you there. So now the part that I want to actually address is how he compares Africa to Asia. Asia was never the prize. If we look at the reason why Europeans came to Africa to colonize Africa, we will start to understand why Europeans came here in the first place. So these Europeans, I remember before picking up any historical book, I asked myself the question, so why did they all come at the same time? Well, they didn't exactly all come at the same time, but why did they all just flood in and come? I know the Portuguese really suffered in Africa and only ended up, because the whole Southern Africa was supposed to be Portuguese, but the Portuguese, they got a lot of ass whooping. So I asked myself, why? Why were they? Why were they so angry? Because they came with a lot of barbarism upon Africa. Why? What did we do wrong? Like, there was even a song, a liberation struggle song. It was sang in Zulu, of course. Senzeni na, Senzeni na means what have we done wrong? So you look throughout the world, African people have been targeted. Everybody's aiming at us. So Asians have never been the prize. Let's begin at the trans-Saharan and transatlantic slavery. Where do you see Asians being a target? Were Asians shipped? Yes. Someone can talk about how the Indians in South Africa were actually shipped as slaves. Yeah, true. But that is a very small, it doesn't represent a population. They never really went out after them that much. So it was just in South Africa, they could not enslave the locals. You can't enslave local people because you have to defeat them first and whatnot. So they had to go to India, because if they capture you, and then you with other people from Madagascar, and these people are strangers, you cannot get together and organize, speak different languages and stuff like but they could not do it here. So Africa, to begin with, we don't see genocide like we have seen in Namibia, the German genocide. Where is that in Asia? Where is the project to destroy the mind of the Asian? How many books, how many myths were written or created about Asians? I've never seen an image where Europeans demonize Asians or paint a picture of Asians being inferior in any form. In actual fact, all these projects like eugenics and all that, where you've seen Europeans create lies about IQs. Africa has the lowest IQ, including African Americans. And so what they do is they would put the African at the lowest. They would say we have the lowest IQ than the Europeans. Then the Asians are the smartest. So Europeans have never had a problem with saying, oh, well, we'll say that the Asians are better. Because if you say the Asians are better, so we can look objective. Because it's not about us. Look, we are not the smartest, but we're smarter than these Africans. So Asians have always been used by Europeans to try and make their myths, their narrative, they try and make it seem objective because they don't put themselves at the highest. Like for them, it's like, oh, we don't care if we put the Asians, say the Asians are the most intelligent people. Like we don't really care about that because we know we run the show. So, but the African has to be the one that is told that you have a very low IQ, you are subhuman, your brain is not fully developed, you have no civilization, you are primitive, you are a savage, and you guys are cannibals, and you are eating each other, you running up the jungle and all that. So, yes, where do we see cultural genocide in Asia? It's not there. It doesn't exist. There is no cultural genocide in Asia. That is why the countries that he is talking about that were colonized, he's speaking about Pakistan and the Filipinos and all these places that he says were colonized by the British. When you go there, the people there, 90% of the people there can't speak English. You go to Pakistan, a lot of the people can't speak English. Majority can't, you know. And you come to Africa. If you go to Mozambique, most people don't speak English. It's mostly Portuguese. But you still find a lot of people many people. In fact, people in Mozambique, you have more people in Mozambique that can speak English than you find them. You find in China, which was colonized by the British, or in Pakistan or India. Okay, I don't know about India. I'm not only went there once. But Pakistan, I'm very sure. They speak Urdu. You have some of the select few, the educated ones at the very top that are quite fluent in English, that speak English. But the people on the ground, most of them don't really speak much English. China is even worse. So, how do you then justify a comparison between China and Ghana? Yeah, they were freed at the same time. But if you go to Ghana, you will see the history of transatlantic slavery. People have gone to Ghana and they've taken a tour through, I think it's called the Middle Passage. And many people have come out crying when they actually start walking through there and they sense the spirits of the people that suffered through those middle passages, and that you're not going to see in Asia. So Ghana has that. China doesn't have that. There's cultural genocide in Ghana. I don't think Ghana has a doctor that cannot speak English. I don't think Ghana has an architect that cannot speak English. I don't think Ghana has a psychologist or professor, they cannot speak English, but China does. You don't need to be able to speak English to be a civil engineer in China. Why? Because the Europeans, when they went into Asia, they did not go in there because they wanted the Asians. It was to establish the hierarchy. They said, look, my target is the African. Now, you just need to move out the way. Then I'm going to come and just slap you just twice just to establish dominance and the hierarchy, just to make it clear that, look, yes, the African is my target. You may not be my target, but I got to let you know that don't have ambitions of trying to step up to me. We are number one as Europeans. Yeah, you guys will basically take the second position, and we'll even sing praises and say your IQ is very high. It's even higher than ours. So just chill. So there was zero cultural genocide in Asia. There was, I don't know of any actual physical genocide. When I speak of, I'm not saying the British never killed people. There were obviously battles and resistance and people were killed, but I'm talking about genocide. Like Rwanda, like the genocide of the Herero people, So that is not there. Then we come to the literature. Which part of China do the Chinese have to defend and say, no, we actually built that? Which part of India do the Indians have to defend and say, no, this is our civilization? None. It does not exist. The only people on planet Earth that have to even defend their, besides civilization, that they were here before the colonizer, it's Africa. South Africans are the only people in the world, in fact, in the world, who are told that they were not here. That the Dutch, in fact, there's a video I set up and created regarding that. It's quite a ridiculous claim, of course. They say the Bantu people were not in South Africa. They invaded. They were here after the Dutch. So there's even a timeline. Someone created a ridiculous timeline where the Dutch arrived first and then Amazulu come after and all that. So the only people on earth that I know who are told, who even have to, their very existence and nativity is being debated, are South Africans, African people, black people, It is said that we too are settlers here. So, do Asians have to deal with that? Do they have to say, well, the Shang dynasty, I don't know. Was it Asian? Was it really Asian? Or you guys are just claiming it, you Chinese people, Did you guys really invent martial arts, The Asians never have to deal with that. Today, as we speak, in 2021, you can go to Quora. The debate will still be there in 2022, 2023, 2024, but obviously on social media. Quora is social media, Facebook, Twitter, where they debate, the ancient Egyptians were not black, and pictures pop up. Sub-Saharan Africans, where do we see Europeans going into Asia and naming them? Having naming rights in China, where they said, no, Sub-Saharan Chinese, or sub-whatever, Obviously, there is no Sahara in China. But the point is, that the Asians have never had a spiritual war with the Europeans. And the biggest war, yes, they've had their war, the Vietnam War was quite an extensive one, which the Americans are embarrassed to even talk about today because they got dealt with by a very small country. But the Vietnamese, regardless of the fact that they fought these Europeans for years, they don't have to deal with, no, but you guys were not here in Vietnam. You are settlers or whatever, the Gandhi, or no, not Gandhi, I don't know, Buddhism and whatever. Actually, it's not yours, and this and that. No one is interested in stealing anything from Asia, quite frankly. So the Europeans only went into Asia to just establish that hierarchy and dominance that, hey, he who rules Africa rules the world. And that's what we want to do. So we just need to go in there, just, do a few slaps, a little bit, just to establish dominance, and then we're done. So, China has never had to have a spiritual warfare with China. You go to China, I mean, in Africa, Africans that practice our ancient sacred sciences, which we call African spirituality, are a very minute percentage, a small percentage of the African population. Most of us practice Christianity and Islam. And yeah, people might want to argue that Christianity, it started in Africa. That is true, it started in Egypt, but the fact is, Christianity was not dominant in Africa, even though it started in North Africa. It was not dominant in the region. African spirituality was the dominant. Even in Sudan, they didn't even have. Okay, hold on. Yeah, but yeah, you get my point. So most Africans received Christianity through Catholicism, through the Roman Catholic. All the Africans that say, yeah, well, Christianity is African, none of them are Orthodox either, because Orthodox came before the Roman Catholicism. So most of us, a majority of African Christians received it through the Roman Catholic Church, through Europeans. That's how it came out of Egypt and then into Europe, then it came back. That's the Christianity, most of us. And they would call it, and we had churches like the Swiss Mission, and why did they call it a mission? Because they had a mission to take Africa, and they call them missionaries because these are people that are here to push the mission. So yes, if we were to say, well, yeah, I mean, we chose to be Christians and Muslims. That's fair, fine, you can do that, but it doesn't justify why what was dominant then has become a minority. In fact, if anything, if it was a choice, would have like 10% to 15% of people, Muslims and Christian, and the majority would still remain what we have been in the ancient world. So you go to, when the Moors civilized Europe, the African Moors went into Europe as Muslims, but go to Spain and check how many people are still Muslim, because the Moors, when they conquered Europe, they did not perform cultural genocide. The only thing they did was to benefit them and lift them out of the Dark Ages. So the reason why we Africans look at our culture as demonic, backward and primitive and so on is because of cultural genocide. Africans have suffered a trauma. And they're still not letting us go. They're still saying, the Bantu people in South Africa, you guys are not natives. So we need to be fighting to state our nativity here. If we keep quiet and let it go, South Africa in 1,000 years will become like North Africa. You walk down the street, you ask people, when you say Egypt, people think of Arabs. My people are down, my people up south, not down south. My people up south here in Southern Africa, you speak to them about Egypt or Algeria. First thing, even when I went to Egypt, my neighbors, when people were asking me about the experience of my trip, they're thinking of Arabs. I always have to tell them, no. What I went to see are the achievements of people that have hair like yours and skin color like yours. So this is we are the only people who have to, when you go into the education system, the Chinese, when you go to China, I don't think they have textbooks that's like in South Africa we have or had, haven't been in school in a minute, but back when I was in school, in class, you had to, for your exams, you had to memorize that South African history started in 1652 when John van Riebeeck landed in Cape. That's that. So, did the Asians have to deal with that? No, they did not. They did not. They did not have to deal with that. So, and as we speak today, it's still our same textbooks. Yeah, they might have changed things. It's still Eurocentric at the end of the day. That's why most South Africans don't even know Mapungubwe. Only the ones in the conscious community, and we don't count because we are not the majority. We are just the people that have decided to, push the limits a bit and look for. And became a little curious and started looking for the truth. So comparing Asians to Africa is a complete miss, according to me. So yes, they might have quote unquote received their independence at the same time as Ghana and them. But it's not the same thing. They never really were colonized as we were. There are levels to these things. It's just like when you speak of sanctions, when the Western world sanctioned Zimbabwe, it is not the same sanctioning that apartheid South Africa had. The sanctioning that the sanctions against apartheid South Africa, it's like basically your child does wrong and you slap them slap their hand. Hey, stop it, And then the one on Zimbabwe is actually when you go and cut a branch from the tree. How we used to get our administration of discipline, or the belt, and you whoop them silly. That's basically the difference. There wasn't really sanctions. They were just used to pull a wool over the eyes of whoever they wanted to pull a wool. Like, the ordinary people out there. That, United States is actually against apartheid. Yet, Nelson Mandela was listed in the FBI terrorist watch list. What a contradiction. And the CIA was working with Dr. Death, who was involved in very despicable projects, which until today the ANC will never disclose to the public, or will never allow to be disclosed to the public. Because we know our people here, they will not let that go. There will actually be riots out here. So that one is indeed a very big missing link. We cannot be compared to Asians. So, in conclusion, he mentions that when you do disagree with him, it would be even more relevant if in the process solutions are offered to help extricate Africans from being a consumer to a productive race. So the solution is almost ancient, is not yet ancient. The solution was provided long before we had the first black political party in Africa. So this solution is one of the most famous. It's on everybody's lips, but it's on very few people's intellect in terms of knowing what exactly it's all about. And that is your, almost sounding like a cliche, Pan-Africanism. A lot of 95% of people that mention that word have no clue what it means. They think it's about, we're gonna go help. Oh, there was a discussion where I wanted to go in, but I was cut off for whatever reason or whatnot. And I remember there was a brother there from the States, and he was like, well, we're down with Pan-Africanism, but now I think what we need to do first is help out. Everybody must focus on their problem. We got our own problems, so before we go out there and help the Africans on the continent, we should, solve our own problems. The same what South Africans are saying. Hey, if you tell them about Pan-Africanism, they're like, we got our own problems, we'll help Zimbabwe later. Let them go solve themselves. We sort ourselves out, then we can talk about Pan-Africanism. So that just comes to tell that maybe more than 95% of the people that actually say the term have no clue what it means. And Pan-Africanism has nothing to do with helping people in the first place. It is not a missionary project. It's not a feeding scheme. Pan-Africanism boils down to one thing. If one wants to understand, the African National Congress implemented something they implemented the concept during the liberation struggle. So when they declared armed struggle, they looked at the enemy and said, oh, the enemy is not the Dutch settlers. We are actually fighting against United States, London, Israel, and most of the Western world. But the active ones are United States, Washington, D.C., London. What is the capital of Israel? But yeah, these are the guys we're fighting against. So we need allies. Who is going to be our allies? Yes, many African countries came to participate as allies because of common enemy. But the biggest appeal was to Russia, China, Cuba, And you ask yourself why? Why would the Russians, Europeans themselves, who have the same view on Africans as the British, why would they want to help these black people, these Africans? The reason why was it was all about the ANC capitalized on this, should I call it a civil war between the Russians and the Americans, and it was a war of capitalism against communism, and so on and so on. And that they formed allies, and the ANC waved the communism banner, even though they never meant it. We are communists. So that's how they basically did get help. Yeah. But calling it help, why did Russia assist? Russia was benefiting something in the same way because they were fighting. They wanted to Russia was interested not in freeing black people, but in demolishing the American power in South Africa, which is apartheid. So Russia was going to benefit, and the ANC was going to benefit in getting their soldiers trained in Russia and getting weaponry and all that. We have a big brother. We have Cuba. Why was Cuba interested? Because Cuba was interested in destroying American imperialism. So Pan-Africanism is not about going to give handouts or anything like that. It's about mutually beneficial movements, if I may call that. When two people come together, you have what I need, I have what you need, and we come together. But that's more of a, like if you have a common enemy, you're fighting a common enemy. That's more of being a comrade than Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism was supposed to, first as this foundation, to define what an African is, and the common definition would then bring about cultural unity, cultural identity, one cultural unity, which is very possible if anybody understands African spirituality. You cannot really separate Sudan from Yoruba, from Zulu to Kemetic, to the Congo, Bantu Congo cosmology. It all has the same fundamental principles. So that is what would unite us. So that is what Pan-Africanism is about. It's about cultural unity. It's got nothing to do with, and why it's confusing, and in the conscious community is being even thrown more in the mud, even worse, is because, unfortunately, the biggest bulk of the conscious community come from the teachings of black politicians. They get most people get their consciousness light or ignited through the realm of politics. So someone might have been involved in varsity, in the student activism movement, and then they were told about Marxism, and then they started reading a little bit of that, and then they came into the conscious community. So that's the reason why there's a huge misconception. In fact, I think we need to have a separate space on defining Pan-Africanism. So the black politicians, the African politicians they hijacked this concept in the 1900s. And so when they hijacked it, they put it out there out of context, and people received a counterfeit of what Pan-Africanism is. People will say it's opening up the borders for everybody. But the question is, did we have borders before Europeans came here? Of course we did. So that's the solution. And I had to break down the fact that the solution is now continually being rejected in the conscious community because they get their definition of the solution from the political arena, which was created by Europeans who inserted their puppets who lead the narrative about the runnings of the day and what it means to be revolutionary. So from my side, I think I'll end it there. I don't know if anybody wants to add or subtract to what I've said, or wants to basically add other sections from the book, since it is a book review. But from my side, in conclusion, is Chika, capitalist nigger, is Chika Onyeani right? A book review. My conclusion is that he was partially right and quite incorrect in the most fundamental part of it. Yes, the behaviors that he's talking about, he is pointing them out. Yes, Africans love European poison. We'll spend our hard-earned cash on that. Yeah, we have no, and we don't produce. Yeah, if we wake up tomorrow and decide we are not gonna use any product that is not made by an African, we will not use it. And therefore, before you brush your teeth, you check who made the toothbrush, and you check who made the toothpaste. Yeah, I understand that, but I think he has missed the foundational matters that separate Africa from the rest of the world, in terms of Africa is in a spiritual warfare. We began the war when the Europeans came. As I said in the beginning, they did not use guns to defeat us. They used spiritual warfare. Then guns came into play in between. And then when we so-called received our independence, we walking around freely physically, but the same spiritual warfare that they won over us is still the stronghold for white supremacy today. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody that wants to add or subtract, or you may put up your hand, request to speak, and let us share words of wisdom. Son teach son, daughter teach daughter. Yes, Sister Gladys, you may speak.
Thank you very much, Brother Musoni, for this wonderful teaching. This is something that I've actually been looking for, some space where I can just learn more about this journey, this awakened journey, this African consciousness journey. And I'm just very glad that I came across your space. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And that's all, to be honest, just to say thank you. I have learned a lot, and I enjoyed the space.
No, thank you for the kind words and your participation as well. And it's a pleasure. When the ancestors put us in a position to receive knowledge, it is not for us, it's for all of us. In Africa, you never own anything. What you have, even the child you give birth to. I remember amongst the, it's probably common basically almost everywhere in Africa. They'll say that the child that you give birth to belongs to the community. And that's why we never had orphans, because there are many children back in the days that would grow up not knowing that their biological parents actually passed on. And the people they call mommy and daddy are the siblings of the parents. It could be maybe the younger sister of their mother took them in and raised them as their own. So that's one thing we should always bear in mind, that whatever empowerment you get as an African, ancestors require reciprocation. Reciprocation is called ma'at in ancient Egypt. Truth, righteousness, and justice, and reciprocity. So when we see at the temples in Kemet, and we see the sultans or the pharaohs making offerings to the Neteru, or the so-called gods and goddesses, they we're doing that as a form of reciprocity, because everything that we have, we received from God and the ancestors. Yeah. Thank you. Right. Anybody else that wants to add or subtract? All right. If there isn't anyone else, I'd just like to once again thank everybody for being here. This was recorded, so I will also extract it and post it up on YouTube for anybody that wants to revisit this conversation. So yeah, peace and blessings, peace and black power. May everybody have a great week ahead, and in your preparations for the festives, enjoy them. Have a great family time and all that. And remember, don't let anybody fool you. Christmas is an African holiday. But yeah, anybody that wants more info on that can visit my YouTube channel. You'll find a video breaking that down a little bit. Yeah. All right. Thank you, and Ashe.